Hey guys, welcome back. I'm going to be updating the pledged delegate tracker now that we've moved our way through that South Carolina primary, a commanding victory for Joe Biden, and he ends up getting quite a few of those pledged delegates. Actually, only two of the candidates are reaching the point where they can get something in the way of pledged delegates out of the state, that being, of course, Joe Biden as well as Bernie Sanders. Now, thanks to some of the comments to the last pledged delegate update video that I made after Nevada, I've gone through and made some changes, updating some things, adding some more statistics. So as you can see over here on the right-hand side of the screen, in the bolder text, this is how many pledged delegates are up for grabs in these respective states. And then next to that is how many pledged delegates are still yet to be decided, and that's obviously going to change as I start entering some numbers here for South Carolina. And then also down here at the bottom, I put the names right next to the cumulative numbers of pledged delegates that these individuals have, so it's a little bit easier to read down there at the bottom, but also the percent of the current pledged delegates. So essentially, out of all of the pledged delegates that have been divvied up to this point, this is the percentage that each of these respective candidates have been able to pick up. And then the bottom line is how close these candidates are to getting to the 1,991 pledged delegates needed to win on the first ballot at the convention. Then over here, I have the dates that each of these contests are going to be held, and I've updated it to the point of around mid-March, up there March 17, 2020. And once we start getting to the contests that are beyond that point in time, it's going to be a little bit harder to read everything. So I'm going to have to end up cutting off some of these contests here that have been further in the past. So we'll see how all that plays out and how close this race ends up being once we get to that point in this process. We have a number of contests to work our way through before getting to that point. So in South Carolina, like I said, a very convincing victory for the former Vice President Joe Biden. And based on the current numbers that we have, it would appear that Biden is going to end up grabbing 39 of the 54 pledged delegates out of the state. A very convincing result there, with Bernie picking up 15. So when we add in that math, what we can see here is we get Joe Biden up to 54 pledged delegates, which is 35% of the pledged delegates that have been divvied up to this point, and he's at about 2.7% of the way to 1,991, where Bernie is a little bit higher than him. He's at 60 pledged delegates, 39% of the current delegates, and a little over 3% of the way to getting to that 1,991. Now, I'm a little bit conflicted right now about this one pledged delegate that we have up here for the state of Iowa. The Iowa Democratic Party appears like they're not going to go in and fix the errors that we've seen in a number of the precincts that are reporting. And with that being the case, it looks like that one last pledged delegate from the state will end up going over to Pete Buttigieg. So when I add in those numbers here, that gets Pete up to 26. And it's just kind of an interesting scenario where if they would go through and fix a number of those errors, it looks like that pledged delegate might have gone over to Bernie Sanders, but with the AP now reporting it as putting that pledged delegate in the Pete Buttigieg column, I feel like I should probably do the same, even though it doesn't necessarily feel great awarding a pledged delegate to an individual that might not have legitimately earned it if all of the data would have been reported properly. But Pete Buttigieg also now stepping out of the race before Super Tuesday. And if I had to guess the reason as to why he's doing this, Buttigieg very close to a lot of the Democratic establishment donors. And if you take orders from the donor class and they look at the best case scenario going into Super Tuesday being getting as many candidates to above 15% in these contests as possible, if you have too many individuals in the race, then that could reduce the number that could get above that threshold. And Bernie might be able to run away and get a lot more in the way of pledged delegates. Now, with Buttigieg no longer in the race, even if some of his vote does go over to Bernie Sanders, it makes it more doable for a lot of these candidates to perhaps get above that 15% threshold and split up the pledged delegates more ways, making it tougher for Bernie to run away with this thing. So if I had to guess, that's probably why Buttigieg steps out at this point, even though he actually is in third place in terms of the number of pledged delegates that have been earned thus far. So let me fill in the rest here. All the other candidates picking up 0 pledged delegates. And that's where we stand after the first month of contests, just 4 of those early caucus and primary states. And now on Tuesday, heading into 15 contests, we got Alabama, American Samoa, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, and Virginia. And then also Democrats abroad are going to start voting, but we won't get their tabulation until a week later on March 10th. So at this point, in terms of the predictions that I'm going to make for first, second, and third place respectively across these Super Tuesday states. Probably releasing that video sometime tomorrow or perhaps maybe even early on Tuesday, just depending on how long I want to wait with the polls that are likely to continue to come in, especially after the South Carolina result that we just had. I'd probably like to see something in the way of some new polling data to see what kind of shift that potentially has with boosting up Joe Biden a bit. It would be helpful to get some of that extra data before going in and making all of those predictions. But again, you can probably expect that most likely tomorrow and the latest on the morning of Super Tuesday. So I appreciate you guys stopping by. Consider subscribing for more if you have not already done so, and I hope to see you back here for my next video.